Welcome back for another interview of the main speakers at the Transformational Media Summit. I'm here with Simon Hodgson from the UK CSR Forum, and from his company is going to remind the name. Can you tell us what is the subject of today's event?
Well, I'm here representing, as you say, the Media CSR Forum, which is a group of large media companies looking together at what their social responsibilities are. And the reason I came to speak today was to introduce the idea of brain print. So it's all very well for a big media company to think about what its carbon footprint is or its social impact in terms of who it employs, but the bigger question really is what's the impact of the programs it produces. So when it conveys a message or it changes a behaviour out there in society, it can often have a much larger impact than by changing its own operations internally. And the big companies are beginning to think along those lines, and I was here really just to talk a little bit about what they're doing and how that thinking is going so far.
So do you have examples of companies or big newspaper or media agency who are actually going to that direction, or is it still very, very early days?
It's very early days because trying to understand the problem is a very difficult one. So let me give you some examples. You might say that on, let's stay with the issue of climate change, media companies ought to be persuading us to change our behaviours, to use less energy, to live more sustainably. Well, you immediately get into very practical questions about how we would measure that and how they would do that. And you also get into some interesting philosophical questions about whether they are entitled to, whether they have the democratic legitimacy to impose an editorial view on society at large. The media companies would probably say their job is to reflect society, not to lead it. It's the job of the government to lead it and to change behaviour. So it's early days. The companies are trying to figure out what they might do, how they might do it, whether it's legitimate for them to do it. But we've got companies in our membership, including BBC, Channel 4, Sky, Reed Elsevier, and they're talking together very actively about this topic, and they're really beginning to explore the impact that their programming might have.
Without naming names, I'm sure you encounter some resistance from these companies. How can you convince them, or what can we do to convince them of the importance of that issue?
Okay, the main resistance, I don't think I wouldn't place it as a moral resistance. There's no sense that the people running these companies are bad or morally deficient. Their main argument is that that's not what the market wants. It's not what the audience wants. The audience expects entertainment, and it expects a program to reflect society as it is today. And so the audience is very sensitive to being preached at, or kind of infotainment where they very quickly spot if they're being persuaded to change their behaviours. And so I suppose the question for all of us as consumers of media is to ask ourselves what we do watch. If we do always gravitate to the lowest common denominator, if we always look for the negative, if we always look for the conflict in our stories, that's what we'll get. If we want to see a different positive kind of media, we need to think about what we consume.
Just on this specific point about being attracted by drama and conflict and negativity, isn't there a point to make about the fact that we can have all these negative headlines, and still focusing on solutions? So just covering the bad news, but still saying people are doing things out there on the grassroots level, on the community level. So isn't there a point to make you can still doing sensationalism and having this solution-driven journalism?
I think that's very true. We've been hearing about that in the session that's just finished. We may not be able to change the balance of positive and negative stories, but what we can do is probably make sure that the negative stories create a sense of agency in the viewer or the listener, that they get a sense that something can be done and they may have some part to play in that solution. And I think that would be a very positive development. And I also think that we can probably do more about the balance of positive and negative too. I think that's a possibility, but that's a specific news question, and I think this topic goes much more widely. So if you are a large publisher, you can look at the brain print of the books you're producing. Are they many of the big publishers are really contributing to scientific debate on social and environmental problems in a very positive way. If you're an entertainment producer, you can look at the way that you reflect society back to itself in terms of your storylines and your plots and the characters. And there's good work goes on in that area as broadcasters seek to include issues of the day and work them through with the viewer or with the listener to try and explore how that might affect society. And so it's not just a news question, it's a wider question for all journalism.
And to continue this conversation, is there a website where the audience can get more information from either the Media CSR Forum or from your company?
There is. They could look up the Media CSR Forum's website, which I think is mediacsrforum.org. We also have another website which is talking particularly about the question of media literacy and how viewers or listeners consume media and how we interact with it and how much we understand what we're seeing. And that, it goes by the unlikely name of Elvis Walks. So if you want to look up Elvis Walks, you can find our work there on media literacy.
Thank you so much for talking to us. So here you have a very mysterious name you have to check, and you'll get all information below this video. This was Mark for Vision on TV. Thank you for watching.